I'll start. Okay.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to the second developer talk. Today we have Arit Amana with us, a software developer. Um, I will pass the baton to you, Arit. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Thank
Thank you, Dauda. So thank you so much for having me. Like I was saying earlier, I love giving my time and efforts to people who are seeking to break into tech because tech is the future. And not only do we get to make the world a better place, but we also get to make some good money as well. So I support any and everyone who wants to break into tech. Today, I'm going to be talking about active learning as an early career developer. So just a brief outline of my talk. I'll summarize my story about how I became a developer. We're going to talk about how the journey is greater than the destination. We're going to talk about what's in a question, collaboration, pair programming, and then I'll take your questions at the end. Nothing is off limits with me, so you can ask any and every question that you can think of. So my degree is biology. I worked as a public health analyst for many years before I became a mother, after which I dropped out of the job market to raise my children, at the time, my son. I became a software engineer at 38. And I always say that I have no shame around my age because I find it very empowering to let people know that you don't have to feel like you can't change your life after, your 20s. I went to coding boot camp. It was online for 6 months. This was while raising my children. My son was 5.5. My daughter was an infant. I landed my first developer job 6 months after boot camp. It's not part of this talk, but that was the most horrific part of my journey. And I say it because it's the truth. But it's not part of this talk, but you can have me back and I can talk about that. I currently work at Forum. We are building open source software to empower people to reach millions. The software basically allows you to have an online community. We are very pro privacy, pro data autonomy. And so in many ways, we run against a lot of the values that other community software builders have. I'm not going to call their names. And I also founded Our Time for Tech. It's a nonprofit to empower women in tech specifically. I'm also working on my first online course that I will launch on Teachable. So that's a little bit about me. When I was thinking about what to speak to you all about, Alida School, I was telling Dauda, is an amazing initiative. And I see that you are learning the skills that will enable you to become tech professionals, like a front-end development and all that. But I wanted to talk about some not so obvious skills that in my journey ended up being just as important as my ability to code a really cool website. So that's what this talk is going to be about. Active learning. And so you're learning, but are you learning actively? And are you learning in a way that will set you apart from the competition when it comes time to landing a job? And so when I completed boot camp, we had a new cohort every week, and I was the best in my cohort. My teachers told me, my mentors told me. So I felt very confident. I felt like, yes, I got this when I graduated. And I'm sorry, I just needed to let someone in. And so my portfolio was very cute. I had all my apps there. They looked nice. My GitHub was detailed. I had READMEs for every project. So I was feeling very confident. I was expecting the hiring managers that I applied to be impressed with my applications, not maybe compared to someone who's been working for decades, but someone who is a non-computer science graduate. I had just started, so I felt like my work was good enough. Sorry, I'm just letting people in. And so with all this in mind, I expected that I would get my job within a month or two, and I was looking forward to making some good money. So these were all my expectations after boot camp. But the reality that I discovered was very few of the people who invited me to interview had read my resume or even been through my portfolio in detail. They didn't even look at, they just saw enough to make them feel, oh, okay, let's have a conversation with her. And so I would get into the interview and I was asked a lot of questions about my experience. And I wasn't ready for that because I felt, oh, they're going to interact with my apps. They're going to read my resume. They're going to read this, read that. And so I felt like that was what was more important, but that wasn't the case. Whenever I finished my projects in bootcamp, I never went back over them. I just completed them, and that was the last I looked at them. And so now coming into the interviews and being asked about what I built, I didn't have a grasp. Sometimes I didn't even remember what I had coded because I never revisited my work. And then another aspect of interviewing was I was asked to pair program with the interviewer, either a whiteboard, a challenge, or they give me a laptop, or they send me to like a website like HackerRank, which is very popular, and they give me a coding problem, and I'm supposed to not necessarily solve it myself, but pair together with them. It had been months since I had done that. I had not done any team build. I had not done anything with people. And so that was very challenging for me to then switch to being able to do that in the interview. And so the summary there is, I expected my portfolio to do all the talking for me. Right? I have this GitHub, I have my portfolio, I have my apps, but I realized that if I did not have a firm grasp on my experience as a developer, I wasn't going to convince anyone that I could code, even though I had the GitHub and even though I had the portfolio. And so that is something that I really spend time, if I'm invited to speak or even in my nonprofit, I really spend time helping aspiring developers to understand that your journey is greater than your destination. As you learn, as you go through your courses, ask yourself, am I focused on the end result or am I focused on the process? And you want to start to emphasize your process more than your product. I'm not saying the product and the end result isn't important, but in my experience, the process is more important. And the question of how you built something gives a lot more information to hiring managers than what you built. Because it's in the how that they figure out your work style, your process, and your problem-solving ability. Another thing that I realized from my struggles is when you are learning, you are working. Try not to think of yourself as a student, even though you are a student. Think of yourself as a developer. You are already a developer. And so you want to start practicing aspects of being a developer working while you are, quote unquote, in school. And the more comfortable you get with those processes as a student, the better you will be able to demonstrate them in your interviews and land your job sooner. And so we're going to talk about how to ask empowering questions or effective questions, and we're going to talk about collaboration and pair programming. So the journey is greater than the destination. I love giving this example because this was something that I came up against time and time again in my interviews. So there was an application I built where I integrated the Stripe API to process payments through my application. And whenever I was talking about this application of mine in my interviews, I would always get the question, why did you choose Stripe? When I took the tutorial in bootcamp, they didn't give us any, they didn't ask us any, they just told us, you know, we're gonna use Stripe, and we ran with it. I never gave thought to why I was using Stripe, whether there were other options, and at least spend a little time thinking what the benefits of Stripe were. But this was the question that I kept getting over and over again in my interviews. And so I realized that a common mistake that we make as tech students, or when we are in boot camp, is we are absorbing all this information, but we have turned off our critical thinking, right? So we're not asking the questions beyond the material that we're being taught. And so the advice that I give is, as you're learning, I'm not saying you should, if you don't know something, you don't know it. And so go ahead and learn first, but form the habit of going back over what you've learned and asking why this approach, why this function, why did I do it this way? Are there any other alternatives out there? What can I learn about those alternatives? And I think when you ask questions like this, it turns on your critical mind and allows you to do more than just absorb. You actually begin to process and understand what you're learning. This doesn't apply to your instructor, I think, Mr. George, because Dauda has sung his praises. Sometimes you may have instructors that don't understand or embrace active learning. They may not integrate that concept in the way they teach, but I still think it's your responsibility. You can't use the excuse of, oh, I didn't learn it this way. You can't excuse yourself that way if you want to be successful. Another thing that I learned through my journey is if sharing what you're learning and what you struggle with allows you to have a better grasp, not necessarily on the content, but on the story. Because when you go into your interviews, you are telling a story. It doesn't matter what you're answering. It doesn't matter what they ask you. The ability to tell the story about what you've learned and what you've built will make the difference between, you can have someone who is very knowledgeable and skilled, but if you cannot communicate that knowledge and that skill, you're not going to get the job. And that's something I've seen time, not just in my journey, but with the people that I mentor. And so there's so many ways to share. You can share in writing, which is a blog. You can do audio files. You can do video on YouTube. The medium doesn't matter. This is not about being an influencer. This is not about how many people are following you. The whole goal of sharing is the more you talk about it, the more you practice accessing your story, accessing your process mentally, being able to talk through something that you built, being able to point out, oh, I struggled here. This is how I fixed it. These are the stories that you will be telling, not just for your first job, but throughout your career. And so the better you are able to access these stories, the more successful you will be in your career. All right. Now let's talk about asking questions, because this is the most common activity for any early career developer, including myself. You're going to be asking a lot of questions. And when you ask effective questions, you empower people to serve you, to help you better, and you also serve yourself. So effective questions provide enough context so that the people who are helping you, you can help them to help you. And when you ask effective questions, you stay an active participant in the problem-solving process. There's a way you ask a question and you almost pass the burden of the problem onto the person who is helping you or who wants to help you. But there's a way you approach question asking that even though you are being helped, you remain an active participant, and you also demonstrate your ownership over your work, right? You don't act as though, oh, I'm so sick of this, I want to be rid of it. It's more of, I am excited, I am motivated, I'm passionate, I don't know how to get to the next step, but this is my work and I own it and I want to get better. Again, why is this important? Because it comes across in interviews. It comes across in interviews. So let's go through one example. I do want to say that typically in the school atmosphere, you might feel like, why do I need to bother with, asking questions with context and, what is Arit talking about? Because typically in a school environment, you're being cuddled, you're being pampered, you're being supported, but it's not about while you're in school, it's about after in the rest of your career. So in my opinion, this is a critical skill. So let's look at an example. So this is a less effective question. My code to reveal the modal on button click is not working. Help me, right? So this person has a button. They have a modal that is probably hidden. I came up with this example because Dauda said you're front-end people. So you have a modal that is hidden and you're clicking this button and the modal is supposed to pop up. And this person is saying that the modal is not popping up. It's not a bad question. It's not a stupid question, but I think it can be more effective. So let's look at a more effective question. I've created an event listener on my button to activate the modal, but when I click the button, I get the console error, modal button is undefined. However, I did define the modal button in my function. Please show me if I'm missing something. I'm willing to pair. Thanks. A lot more words, but in my opinion, it's more effective because it does several things. You first of all summarize what you've coded or whatever setup you've accomplished. You summarize what you've done. You've created an event listener. What is the event listener for? To activate the modal. Then you describe the behavior that you're getting as opposed to what you expect to get. I click the button and I'm getting this error. There's no modal popping up, right? Then you talk about if you've taken some steps to troubleshoot, you can summarize that as well. That's the sentence. However, I did define the modal button in my function, because if you've done that and you don't say that, many people will respond and say, oh, did you define the modal button? Did you do the document queries? And, they'll say that. And so you kind of, sidestep a lot of obvious solutions by stating what you've already done. And then you make a specific request, right? Show me if I'm missing something, I'm willing to pair. I think it's good to state that I'm not just looking for an answer here, but I'm willing to work with you. I'm willing to pair with you so we can work through it together and I can see how you arrive at the solution, right? So in my experience, I find that when you ask effective questions, the fact that you don't know what you're asking about almost goes away, right? You don't seem as new as you may be, because you've taken the time to contextualize your question and to summarize what you've already done, and people see that you've taken the effort, right? Now, you may have done all these things, but if your question doesn't reflect that, remember, it's not what you've done, is what you can talk about, right? It's not what you've actually done, it's what you can demonstrate and what you can show that you've done, all right? Okay. The last point that I want to talk about is a teamwork, right? So I'm not too sure, Dauda can speak on this, how much teamwork you do at Alida, but teamwork is the job, okay? The job is not coding. Coding is a means to an end. The job is teamwork to build something that you can't build on your own and put it out there. And so it's not just what you're building, but what you build as a team. And so one thing that I strongly recommend is embrace team-centric habits as much as you can. So for example, even if you're working on a personal project, it's your project, no one's working on it with you. You're using Git, and I know Dauda said you all are getting into Git and GitHub. Lean into branching. Don't always work on the same branch, either main or master. Why? Because that's not realistic in a work environment. You're going to be working off of branches. Use pull requests in your own work. I don't have time. I would demonstrate it if I did, but just because it's your application, work off of a new branch, leave main or master alone. And then when you've done the work, cut a pull request against your own project and merge. When hiring managers go into your GitHub and they see that you have pull requests that you merge and you have issues that you created for your own personal project, what that tells them is this is someone who can function in a work environment. Even without you saying anything, they get to see that. And so that's what I mean by embracing team-centric habits, both while you're at Alida and even individually as a developer. I also want to talk about pair program. Don't wait to be invited. Don't wait for people to reach out to you to say, hey, can we work together? Always take the initiative to pair with your course mates. You can pair with engineers that have more experience, through your networking. Pair programming is more than just getting help or getting ahead. It's also learning how to communicate technical concepts, say things with technical jargon. It helps with recognizing bugs and errors, particularly like if, because with pair programming, you have the pilot who's the person typing, and then you might have one or more co-pilots with they're watching and they're kind of saying what needs to be done. I actually enjoy being co-pilot more because you're not typing, and so you get to focus on what it is that is being coded, and you can easily and quickly point out errors, bugs. You can point out optimizations, ways to do things better. And you also get practice in asking questions. And of course, you also get to improve your collaboration skills, working with other engineers. So it's important. The reason I say that is because even in boot camp, you might be in a boot camp, but you're kind of like a lone wolf, everything's solo, solo, solo. And it might help you in the short term, but long term, it pays to think as part of a team and to build those habits. So in summary, your journey reveals more about your skills, your competencies, and your motivation. Don't be so caught up with destination and final product. Start accessing and talking about your journey and the process by which you are learning what you're learning. Learn how to ask effective questions. It shows ownership of your work. It keeps you participating in solving your own challenges. You're not handing it off to someone else and then just, swallowing the answer, okay, and it's done. But you show that ownership and you show that drive. And no developer is an island. As much as you can, incorporate other people in your process, learn together, embrace team-centric habits as a developer, and that will only help you to function effectively in teams and in the future of your career. Thank you so much. That's it. I think we have a good amount of time left. You can follow me on social. I am Arit Developer in most places. You can also join my newsletter on my website, arit.dev. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arit. Thank you very much. I will share your social media details in Slack group later.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for the talk. Very, very insightful, and the advice you gave was really excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. I will open the floor for Q&As.
Okay. Should I keep sharing my screen or should I switch back to the?
Yes, I think it's okay if we stop sharing for now. Yes.
Okay. All right. I can always share again.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. I'm going to open the floor for questions.
Okay.
In our last talk, we had many questions. So
okay.
Anyone has any question, please put your hand up, and then I will essentially pass the microphone to you. Okay, so we have George, we have Karima as well. Ladies first, Karima, please go ahead.
Hi, Arit.
Hi, Karima.
You talked about landing your first job after the bootcamp by 6 months after, and you said that was like the hardest part. So I'm curious, why was that the hardest part?
It's a great question. It was very hard for me because I really didn't know what to expect. And I wasn't as prepared as I thought I was. So part of it was pride, right? So part of it was feeling that like I was the it, and then realizing that I wasn't. So let me give some statistics. So I applied to close to 100 jobs. Out of those 100 jobs, I only had 3 final rounds, just 3. And I would say out of those 100 jobs, I didn't get past the first round for about 70 something of them. Yeah. So it was a process by which I had to, first of all, be disappointed and be depressed, right? You eat the ice cream, you eat the candy, it's like, oh, this is the biggest mistake of my life. You go through that whole process. And then you come out on the other side and say, okay, the only way out of this forest is through. So I just have to keep going, right? And going through that process. And then another part that made it so difficult was every rejection that I experienced threatened to make me feel like I didn't have what it takes, right? I don't have a computer science degree. I've only learned 6 months. I don't know everything. There's so much more to software development than just the code. You have the system side, you have the database side for backend. Once you start backend, you see that. And, a lot of that knowledge only comes on the job. That's the reality. But these hiring managers will interview you as though you have all this knowledge, And so that was a very discouraging part of the process as well. It was just the no. You have a phone screen, you think you did well. No, some of them will ghost you. Some of them won't even bother rejecting you. They'll just forget that, they talk to you and move on. And then, for the few that maybe you pass the phone screen and then you do the coding challenge, some coding challenges, they gave me 3 days. I used the entire 3 days. So I didn't even have time at the end to maybe go over my work because it literally took me the whole 3 days. And they will say things like, oh, most people complete this in a day. We're going to give you 3 days. And so when it takes you the whole 3 days, then it's like, oh, wow, I must be worse than the people, these other people, So it just, the summary is, it tests your resolve and it tests your belief that you are built for software development, and whatever you don't know, you can learn. It tests that resolve. At least it did for me. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Arit. George, please go ahead.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening, George.
Good evening, Arit. How are you doing?
I'm good,
Nice
thank
to
you.
hear from you today. I really appreciate. So, okay, I have two questions actually,
Yes.
and it's from my own experience. Now, I was applying for a software role, and
Yes.
I was given an algorithm question to answer, like 3 questions to answer, and they were all freaking crazy.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know there was something like data structure and algorithm, and this is like almost 3 years after then of studying web front-end development. Yeah, I got up to few. So when I saw the questions, I didn't know whether that was French or German or Dutch, but I know it's English, but it sounded so awkward. So I actually got 0/300 because I didn't want to cheat. I didn't want like ask any of my senior colleagues to help me out. And that was
Yes.
when I made up my mind to go and learn the task structure algorithm. So I'm like asking, why do companies do that? Because I passed the first interview, the oral interview, I passed so many interviews and got to the algorithm part. So why do companies liaise with algorithm companies to set questions where at the end of the day you get to maybe center a div for front ends? You know, that's like a joke of front end developers. And second one,
Yeah.
hiring Nigerians. Why do the overseas company like they always look down on Nigerians when they are hiring them? I don't know. There is a recent tweet online. I've forgotten his name. He's a Yoruba guy. He made that I've forgotten the job role that the guy was offered $10,000.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw
Yeah, you
that
saw that,
tweet.
right?
It's
Like that's
ridiculous.
crazy. That's
Yeah,
crazy. Why are you doing that? Like
I know.
you are
Yeah.
paying the person based on the country, based on the
Right.
location. It's
Right.
unfair.
Right.
And
It
that
is.
guy engineer, trust me, I know my brothers in tech in Nigeria. If they are set to do something, they will do it better. But why do they keep doing something like that? It will end up demoralizing us that are coming up.
Yeah.
So those are my two questions. Like, why are the algorithm question each time? And why are they underpaying Nigeria? Because it demoralizes us.
Yes. The algorithm question, I can talk for days on that, but we don't have days. So I'll give a short answer. I think, and let me say this, slowly things are changing. And so we have more and more companies that are moving away from the algorithm method of screening applicants and are moving to a more holistic, let's talk about your work, let's talk about what you've done, and maybe high level questions about, solving issues, right? I think the algorithm habit is a leftover from, this elitist, like this elitist mentality in tech, like 10x engineer, this engineer that can do everything, this engineer with a brain like a computer, when the reality is we don't need brains like computers because we have computers, right? Like let the computers do their job and we will do what the computers can't do, which is think, right? And so I think it is a leftover from that archaic and might I say, very elitist mentality, right? Some people do it because they think it's an effective screen. Like if you have 300 applicants and you hit them with a difficult algorithm, it's definitely going to cut the 300 maybe down to 50. So some people do it. They don't really care about what other factors that they're filtering out by doing that. You might have hard workers, you may have creative workers, you may have people with unique backgrounds that allows them to better understand the end user. All those things count. But when you reduce people's ability down to the ability, for my life, I've never been able to implement bubble sort, from my head. And right. So I think the more, and that's why I do what I do. I want to be more than just a developer. I want to be an advocate. I want to get better at my skill so I can climb the ranks and become a hiring manager. I think the more diversity that we have at the top, I think those kind of practices will continue to, to reduce and to dwindle. Yeah. And then, oh my gosh, location-based compensation is greed. It's just greed. I think that's the
For real.
it's greed, and it's disrespectful, and it's almost like determining your standard of living for you, right? Like, okay, fine. you think that things are cheaper, quote unquote, in Nigeria than overseas. That's not true. Things can be a lot more expensive. But I think when you do location-based compensation, it's disrespectful. You're not compensating that person's ability. You're penalizing them for where they live. And it shouldn't be, in my opinion, it shouldn't be like that. So again, people at the top that think right, like me, I think that's why I'm so passionate about doing what I'm doing with you all, because that is what is going to change the tide. Change happens in the hallways of power, okay? The masses can shout and scream all they want, but until it touches the hallways of power, nothing is going to change. And so that's why, as much as possible, we need to get into those hallways of power so that we end up making the decisions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We are nearing the end of the session. Thank you very much, Arit, for making time for the session. It was very, very insightful. Thank you.
Sure.
And also thank you to every single one of our students and to George, our teacher, as well, for making it. I will share Arit's website and social media handles on the Slack channel shortly. And yes, this was great. I did learn so much, and I hope everyone did as well.
Thank you for having me. I enjoy meeting all of you, and I just want to encourage you. I told Dowda earlier, I love what he's doing, the empowerment and the ambition, right? Tech is here. Tech is the future, and the future is here. And so I think, and one thing I like about tech is it has the potential to be such a leveler. It has the potential to be a leveler economically, intellectually. It gives us, I mean, how many fields can you say with the earning potential and all you need is a laptop and a text editor? How many fields can you say that, right? So that's what I love so much about tech. And I love that more and more people are getting into tech. We need more people in tech. We need more diversity in tech, because that's the world. The people who are building these applications need to reflect the people who will be using them. And the world is diverse, so why not the developers? So I just want to encourage all of you. It's tough. It's difficult, but it's worth it. And I encourage you to stick with it. A lot of times you have to expose, I'm watching the time, Dowda, don't worry. A lot of times you have to expose yourself multiple times to something. Don't judge yourself with the first exposure. Keep coming back to that concept. Keep coming back to that teaching. Keep coming back to whatever it is you're being taught. With repeated exposure, it starts to sink in. It starts to sink in, and you just keep practicing. Never stop. Life happens. You may have to slow down, but there's a difference between going slower and parking the vehicle and climbing out. Never park, don't climb out. Adjust as you need to. Life happens. I did it with 2 children. It wasn't easy. It was very difficult. But the key thing was I refused to give up. You do what you have to do. If you have to keep a job, that's fine. It may take you longer. Don't compare yourself. You have all these sexy stories. Oh, I broke into tech in 2 months. Yeah, whatever. It might take you 2 years. It's your life, it's your journey. So don't compare yourself to anyone. If you want it, then you deserve it and you should go for it. So I just want to encourage all the students. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Arit. Thank you. It was a pleasure. I love to talk. Yes. We will try, if it works well, yes, to get you in for the next cohort.
Awesome. I would love to be back. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All
I wish
right,
you
then.
all the rest of a good day, and goodbye for now. Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
for
much,
having
man.
me.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.